you know, more than 1/3 of the way.
Yeah, 1 week is gone.
Week
already in second week today.
Second week today, yeah. So it's a matter of great joy that we've been able to accomplish. So we'll just continue hearing a little bit more about the mind, because the purpose of this meditation is manifold. One of them being the purification of the mind, clearing the mind. We talked about this earlier, that mantra actually includes within it the word mana, which means the mind. So that's what we are trying to do. Of course, in the ultimate sense, we want to go even beyond the mind, and we want to ultimately evoke this dormant, loving affection within the heart. But in order to get there, we have to go by purifying the mind and the intelligence first.
Yeah, we have to understand what we are dealing with. In order to do anything with it, we have to first understand what the mind is. So we talked about the soul so far, talked about we are not this body, we are not this mind, but then we have a mind, and what is the nature of that mind? Bhagavad Gita speaks a lot about mind. Our Vedic wisdom texts, they also speak a lot about the mind, and a lot of recommendations are given how to deal with the mind, because mind is what we are carrying us.
Actually, there's a very beautiful section in the Srimad Bhagavatam which says that the cause of all my suffering is actually this mind. And there's a discussion between Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad is being persecuted by his father, and Prahlad tells his father that other than this misguided mind, there is no greater enemy in this world. So, this is actually what we are dealing with, and this is what we want to get over is actually this control of the tyranny of this mind. So with that, let's get into the presentation. Just a short few slides that will help us understand that what we are dealing with when we try to practice this mantra meditation.
Not this
one. Yeah, not this one. Mind your mind.
So Krishna speaks these two verses about the mind in the 6th chapter. He says, Uddhared atmanam atmanam natmanam avasadayet atmeva hi atmano bandhu atmeva ripuratmanaha. So he says, one must deliver himself with the help of his mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well.
So it can be either of the two, right?
Yeah.
And then the next verse continues, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So again, we are living with this mind continuously 24/7. And, if we find that someone is our enemy, then we may choose to distance ourselves from that person. But in this case, we're actually living with an enemy that we cannot even shut off. And in fact, what to speak of shutting him off, we consider him our greatest ally. So that is actually considered to be the worst thing, when an enemy becomes your ally, when he enters into your camp and then and disguises himself to present himself as your ally, as your confidant, as your advisor, right? And you start taking shelter of your enemy, then you know for a fact that we are in actually very bad hands. And so let's continue. So here is, okay.
This is another verse that describes the nature of the mind. It says, Mano vasenne yabhavansma deva manaschananyasya vasham sameti vishno hi deva sahasa sahiyan yunjad vasetam sahi deva deva.
All the senses have been under the control of the mind since time immemorial, and the mind himself never comes under the sway of any other. He is stronger than the strongest, and his godlike power is fearsome. Therefore, anyone who can bring the mind under control becomes the master of all the senses. So godlike power. So that's what we are dealing with. So when we are chanting this, practicing this mantra meditation, this is what we are trying to, control. Or actually not even control, because you really cannot control this, because it never comes under the sway of any other. But what we are doing is actually alluring the mind, transforming the mind.
Attracting the mind to come under Krishna's control. And then we don't have to worry about controlling the mind, because Krishna, he can charm the mind, and only Krishna can charm the mind. And that's the whole purpose of this mantra meditation. Somehow or the other, if the mind can become attracted to Krishna and his names, then we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to deal with this gorilla anymore.
Right. It's like the sound can captivate this mind. And then the mind, then you don't have to worry about it. So, an example that is sometimes used, and this is an example that is used by Lord Chaitanya, is that mind is compared to many, many different things. But one of the things it's compared to is actually a mirror. And just like, especially if you live in a place like India and you keep your house doors, your house locked for a few months, and you come back and you have a mirror and the dust gets in. And then there is a thick layer of dust that actually is covering that mirror. And then when you try to see in that mirror, you cannot see anything. All you see is dust. So in the same way, the reason why we're not able to see reality, we're not able to see ourselves, is because our mind has been covered by this thick layer of dust accumulated over countless lifetimes. And so this process, and how do you clean that? You can't just clean that. You can't just wish it away. You can't just use your intelligence to say, all right, I'm just going to have clarity. It doesn't happen just by positive thinking. It actually happens when you have to take up, what do? You have to have a spray. You have to have some rags. You have to actually get down on your knees and scrub that mirror. So same way, this is what we are doing. We're scrubbing the mirror of the mind by the sound vibration.
And when the mirror is, because the mirror sits in front of the soul. And when the mirror is dusty, the soul cannot see itself. The soul cannot see itself as a spiritual being. So when the mirror is cleansed, then the soul can see, oh, this is who I am. So this is one example of what the mind is compared to. There are several examples what the mind is compared to in our scriptures. And one of the examples that is compared to is considered as a window to this outside world. So we look at the world through the lens of our mind, actually. Atmavan, it says, Atmavan manyate jagat, that whatever our mind is, that's how we'll perceive the world as. That's how we'll perceive others as.
I think they say we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. Right? So
that's another example. Mind is a window to this world. So depending on which side, what we are seeing from the mind is important, because then we can interact with this world in the right way.
Yeah, and if the window is, cloudy, then we don't get to see.
Or if the window is closed.
If the window is closed, we don't get to see. And sometimes the window is also compared to a screen, right? Which means that the mind is constantly projecting reality onto the screen. What is a screen? A screen is something on which you project a movie. So the mind is continuously playing these movies in our head. And we live in those narratives and those realities. And then we never get to come out of it. So it's like a movie theater. So with this power of mantra meditation, what we're doing is that we're transforming that experience. And no longer the mind gets to tell us stories. We get to rewrite our own stories. The soul actually gets to decide what stories it's going to tell and what stories it's going to accept. So it's like really reclaiming one's original power and not being under the sway of this mind, which is really not our well-wisher at this point. It's actually no one's well-wisher. In a conditioned state, it's kind of like, think of this as like a monkey sitting on your shoulder, and it's completely crazy. And you're walking, and suddenly the monkey will say, "Jump into this well. Just jump. Just do it." Right? And it's like, and then you have kind of followed. Now you've made this monkey your guide. So you just do whatever the monkey tells you to do, and then we land up into trouble.
And I guess the whole world actually wants a piece of our mind. And that's what the advertising industry or whoever, the media is trying to influence our mind in such a way that we'll do whatever we are meant to, what they want us to buy or
I like that very much, actually. The real estate, right? The prime real estate
is our mind.
And everyone's trying to grab a piece of it. And so this process of mantra meditation means reclaiming it back.
Or not letting it be
up for sale. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not up for sale.
It's not up for sale. So with that, I guess we'll get into our chanting. This is all. Oh yes, this is a actually Native American story, which talks about how there are these two wolves or two foxes, and one of them is the bad wolf or the bad fox, and the other is the good wolf or the good fox. And the story is of the two, and they're fighting with each other. And so the story, kind of goes through this question that, so who when they're fighting, who's going to win? And so, the answer is that the one that you feed the most. So, whatever we are feeding, and this is kind of what's happening in the world right now, that whatever we associate with, whatever sound vibration we associate with, that sound is actually going to determine our thoughts, our desires, and the thought patterns within our mind. And so when we are chanting this Maha Mantra, what is happening is we are realigning or reconstructing our mind, re-engineering our mind actually, so that the mind becomes, can really lead us in the right direction. And it can win over this bad side of us, which is constantly pulling us down.
So we want to get into the habit of feeding the right dog, right fox.
So we'll get into this chanting now.
Turn on the music.
So when we chant, let's really, it's been 8 days now. So let's really take a time to really let the mind just, one time Prabhupada was asked this question. So Prabhupada, when I chant, I get disturbed by the mind. Prabhupada says, where is the question of the mind? Just chant and hear. So that means that we have to bypass the mind. And this is actually what the mantra meditation does. And this is something maybe we'll read tomorrow. There's a very beautiful segment that Prabhupada actually spoke on this chanting process. And he says that how the mind actually bypasses the physical, mental, intellectual, emotional strata of our consciousness and goes directly to the spiritual strata. So we just want to bypass the mind. So we want to neglect the mind, just like when a child is throwing tantrums or the child is very naughty, then one of the things we want to do is neglect it, not give in to every single whims and fancies. So.
Just 1 second, I'll bring up the mantra. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much for another wonderful session of mantra meditation. And now we can take having any reflections or any thoughts, anything that you may want to share with the group, please feel free. Yeah, that's good. Do we feel any difference with the mind? You've been chanting for 8 days now. Is there any shift in terms of being able to focus better? The mind feels more tamed. How to manage and reduce emotional stress in our everyday life? Again, there are many ways that we can respond to that question. And of course, if you like, we can also talk about the specific situation. But in general, part of the reason why we experience emotional stress is because of deep feelings of attachment and deep feelings of identification with the mind. And when we identify with the mind, then all the thoughts that go through the mind are seen as reality, and they're seen as actually pertaining to oneself. And so that is actually the reason why we experience great anxiety, great fear, great emotional distress. Through the process of mantra meditation, one starts to become an observer of the mind. One starts to see that actually you're not this mind, you're not these thoughts, you're not these emotions, and they just kind of, it's all just happening like on a movie screen. That's one way to understand it, but there's also another way to understand it, which is that the more we develop this trust with, with the Supreme Person, then to that extent, we don't see things as just happening in a random manner. Because it's the randomness of the events that creates the most amount of anxiety. And when we see the loving hand of our dearmost friend who is gently guiding us towards a deeper reality through those emotional experiences, then we become more grateful as we go through those experiences.
And also developing our emotional relationship with Krishna, because emotions are ultimately meant for having a loving relationship with Krishna and with others in that, with Krishna in the center. So as we harness that, as we develop that relationship more and more emotionally, mentally, intellectually, then the emotional ups and downs of this world will not affect us so much more. It will start fading away. Just like when we take like Tylenol, the headache starts fading away. Like you can see it and experience it.
Actually, an example that just came to my mind as you were speaking was, if you see a small puddle, especially during the rainy season, you see a lot of these puddles. And so what happens is that because the puddle is so shallow, so when it rains, the puddle becomes filled with water. And then when it stops to rain, then the puddle becomes completely dried up. But the same thing is not true of the ocean. It's not affected by either the rainfall or the drought. It's always full. So through the process of chanting and developing this mood of bhakti and gratitude, we become as deep as the ocean. And we are no longer like small tiny puddles where any little thing that comes into it creates a disturbance. And Krishna speaks about that in the Bhagavad Gita, that the mind of a yogi is such that so many rivers enter into the ocean, but still the ocean is not agitated. I hope that helps, Kakuli. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna, Mataji and Prabhuji. I really like the point where you mentioned that mind is a friend as well as an enemy. Depending upon which side you want to feed, that's how it reacts. I was thinking, Mataji, I just have one question. Most of the time, the mind gets disturbing thoughts. That's what I have seen, but it's always tells us that this is urgent, go and attend that, leave this thing, go jump to the next thing, jump to the next thing. But how do we truly, because there are truly emergency situations where we have to go and attend, we cannot ignore those situations. So how do we differentiate that this is an emergency and we have to attend this thought from mind, and this is not an emergency, we can postpone it and attend it later. There are some commonsensical thing that I understand, like somebody's life death situation, that's an emergency, that's a commonsensical thing that I understand. But in general, which things we should attend to our mind and consider it as an emergency and leave everything and go and attend those things on a priority, uh, and which things we should like just leave it, other than the commonsensical things, if you can help me understand.
I guess there is no formula for that. I guess what my experience is, when we make this chanting process as the most urgent thing in our life and the most important thing in our life, then Krishna will give us the intelligence. He says, Mata Smriti Jnanam Apohanam Cha, that I give the intelligence by which you can come to me. Right? He also says in the 10th chapter that those who are dedicated to me and accept me as an exclusive shelter, then I give the intelligence by which they can come to me. So Prabhupada also explains that when Mother Yashoda, like she drops Krishna and goes to take care of the boiling milk, then so she prioritizes that over, and then Krishna obviously gets upset for this pastime. But the point that Prabhupada makes there is that Krishna gives the intelligence what to prioritize and what not to prioritize. So that's the general principle that comes to my mind. But if you have other thoughts,
I guess I was just thinking that, this is actually work in progress. Like for me too, I can share, like we have had Vaisheshika Prabhu come and stay, with us in our house. And many times, I notice that things that I would consider to be something that needs immediate attention, he is very comfortable putting that on a back burner and first doing what he needs to do and then attending to it. And so that actually was like, was an experience that has made a real impression in my own heart, that sometimes we just think that these things cannot wait. Or it's really the mind that's kind of driving us, like
creating this false sense of urgency.
False sense of urgency. And when we think about the gopis, for example, the greatest devotees, for them, nothing is urgent before Krishna's, service. Now, of course, we cannot artificially be there, but we start working on ourselves. And I think Stephen Covey talks about this, putting the big pieces in, like, for example, he says that if you have a jar and you have these big pieces of rock and smaller ones, and then sand and so on, and what do you first put in? And he says that one should put the biggest pieces in there, and then the smaller pieces will automatically find its place. So it's practice that we do consciously throughout our lifetime, that we start prioritizing our spiritual life more and more and more and more, and then we see that those small urgencies, they will start finding their place in it. Otherwise, we live a life which is basically just putting out fire for our entire life. And we have done, all of us have done it, that we're continuously in the fire, putting off fire mode. And then we never get to things that are of real critical importance for us, things that are of real value. So, instead of that, we should just try to make those, and then Krishna will give us the intelligence, like you're saying, how to do it. But at least we start by making this attempt. We see that even when a person takes this vow that I have to do this for 21 days, the whole, it almost feels like everybody starts to conspire, right?
To make it not happen.
To make it not happen. So many distractions, so many urgent things, so many guests, so many family obligations, social, it's not easy. And therefore Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that out of thousands, only one person can actually attain me. Thank you, Fal Pandya, for joining. Thank you. We're very happy that you could join, and hope that you can join again. It's a real honor. So hope that helps.
Yes, Prabhuji, Mataji, really like that mercy on, depending upon the mercy of the Krishna to get that intelligence. So yeah, thank you, Mataji.
Yeah, we give Krishna the priority. I guess a simple formula is in our day-to-day life, we give Krishna the priority, and then Krishna will help us figure out the other things.
Yeah, all those obligations, we've seen that.
Yeah.
Material nature has a way of keeping us happily engaged, or maybe not so happily engaged, right? But Krishna, when we start taking shelter of Krishna, he starts to remove all those cobwebs, and life actually becomes easier. You actually start to get more time in a day. It's amazing. It's actually mystical how that happens, but you'll see it. You'll actually have more time to get things done.
Or I guess the other way to put it is, as you have seen in Vaisheshika Prabhu's and other devotees, example, is to stuff our day with hearing and chanting as much as we can. There is no loss in stuffing our day with hearing and chanting, and whatever little time is left, that's take care of other things that we need to.
Yeah. Anything else?
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
I just want to share a thought here. Since you asked how you are feeling after 8 days of meditation, one thing that I have felt is that I am a little more calmer than I was 8 days before, and so at any point of time, if I feel have any kind of negative thoughts, or I feel anxious, or I feel anger, I always, because of this meditation, I always take a step backwards and think, no, I mean, the whole purpose of doing this meditation is love and service. So I think that thing always comes in my mind. So I think that ways it has helped me a lot, and it would in the future as well.
Thank you.
That's wonderful, Srishti. Thank you for sharing that. That's very encouraging to hear.
Yeah, and it's true. We've all experienced it as we keep doing it over years and years and years. So many things, stuck patterns of thinking, right? It goes, yeah, it's very wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hey, Laura, thank you for joining. If you may ask, where are you joining from?
Guru Shankar, if you have any thoughts you want to share, Mel, Vinny.
Yeah, I sort of observing for the first time the good things in life. So I guess take little time for me to digest and set the priorities right as we move on. Yeah, it's taking a little bit of time, but I guess I'm on the track to get onto the right track rather.
Yeah, no, that's true, and it's good that it's good to take time. And this is something, there is no rush. Bhakti is something that we can practice at our own pace, in our own time, and know that we can have that sacred space where we can feel safe, to not feel rushed, or to not feel that I have to get somewhere. And that itself is very, very powerful, because it unravels the heart.
Yeah, let it soak in.
Let it soak in. I like what you said.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Aditi, if you have any thoughts? Misha, so wonderful that you're joining. So happy to see you. Vinny, Reno, Kara, Eunice. All right, so then maybe we'll thank you, Mamta. Chanting is making you happy, calm, and peaceful. Yeah, that's our experience too. So yeah, we'll maybe pause here and see you guys tomorrow again. Keep the vibration going, and we wish you.
Keep feeling the good vibes.